legitimate countdown. All right.
Yeah. Because like if
Sorry,
we
when I'm usually on this, I'm usually just on Twitter and just
no
watching.
worries. Because like before, like if we just go like live, because we multi-stream on different platforms, and then like so like for like sometimes like Facebook will get the stream like a minute late, and then so like if we're watching on Facebook, like even the replay, it's like already like you cut off a big chunk. So this gives an opportunity for people to like file in, I guess.
This
Let
has
me just
definitely
share that live
gotten
link.
this has definitely gotten more
Welcome to SPSM, it's a chat. Hosted by Rudy Caceres. This week's panel, at TrevorLMSW, at Social Work Desk, at MFK Therapy. Got all that in. And we're live. Are you ready? Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new SPSM Chat, Suicide Prevention Social Media. I am your host, Rudy Caceres, at Rudy Caceres on Twitter. Let's see if I can get this right. Boom. And today's topic is going to be, boom, is your social work anti-racist? And if it is it anti-racist enough? And I have quite a panel. We're back to our four-person panel. It's been a while. I feel like we're going old school when this is the way it should always be, I guess. But I have Roving Social Worker at Social Work Desk and at MFK Therapy. They're going to talk about their views and their work. And because I am not a social worker, I'm racist, like all of our panelists as well, and as are all of you as well. So we'll talk lots about that, and we'll get into that. Please no one clip that on Twitch. Twitch.tv/SPSM Chat. Facebook.com/SPSM Chat. YouTube.com/SPSM Chat. And of course, Twitter.com/SPSM Chat. We are, of course, at SPSM. If you're on the Twitter chat, please make sure to use the hashtag SPSM in all your tweets. That way we can give you a shout out and you can be a part of the conversation. And so we stream, of course, every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. But that's enough of my spiel. Let's get into the swing of things. Let's get on to our first panelist. Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM Chat universe, galaxy, solar system, who is the Roving Social Worker.
Hi, I'm Jay, the Roving Social Worker. I've been on Twitter for a couple of years as TrevorLMSW. I primarily, or at least the last 4 years, I've been engaging in travel social work, which is contract work through a staffing agency, which has led me to 3 different states and 2 tribes. I've been on 2 reservations. I'm currently in Montana. I'm actually on sovereign land in Montana, working my 5th contract on a 3rd extension, which is quite rare. I have a master's in social work, and I am a doctoral student for a DSW program.
Yes, and you helped wrangle our panel this week, which I'm much appreciative. And you've followed SPSM for quite some time. I'm always seeing you in the Twitter chat, and so it's so nice to finally be able to work together. You excited?
Oh yeah, and anxious, and it's fun because I brought 2 of my friends who I've worked with before or met. So this is going to be a great hour of us maybe joking more.
I thought you were going to say you brought your dogs along too.
No, they're out there. The door's locked. They're outside. It's fine.
Yes. But speaking of friends, let's get on to our next panelist. Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM Chat universe, who is Matthew L. Schwartz.
Hello, I am Matt Schwartz. I am a social worker. Specifically, I'm a financial social worker and a solution-focused social worker. I'm also a doctoral social work student over at the University of Buffalo. I work at a community behavioral health clinic in the poorest and most segregated zip code in Buffalo, New York, which is also where I happen to live.
Yes, and this is your first time being on SPSM Chat. Like, I don't know like how much you know ahead of time or what you're in for, but
I knew is that Jay said be here, so I'm here.
Yeah, we here at SPSM Chat, we like to keep things a little lighthearted because talking about suicide in and of itself can be very dark. So just know that going in that it's totally fine to joke or laugh, but because suicide in and of itself, it's a tough subject. So why not be able to laugh every now and then?
The darker the subject, the darker the humor.
Yes, I thought you were going to say the darker the subject, the closer to God. Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM Chat universe galaxy, who is at MFK Therapy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Fortunado-Kewin. I use the pronouns she and her. I am based in San Francisco, California, on a lonely land. I'm also a social worker. I'm an LCSW. I like to tell folks I've been social working since about 05, 06. I'm also a doctorate student at University at Buffalo with Matt. So yeah, a lot of my focus, I do a lot of different things. I supervise, I teach, I consult, I talk. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I know I'm in the social work field, so that's where I'm at. And I was I was the like background moderator like last year sometime or 2 years
Yes.
ago. I forget what's the time now. Being in COVID world, you never know.
Yeah, it's sometimes I forget that like I was doing SPSM chat in that weird period of 2020, like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and so it just all kind of blends into me. And then I was like, did it like in 2019 as well, where like like it felt like 2020. It's like the world was limitless. Here we are, 2021. We're all like in our rooms and still, and hopefully things will continue opening up responsibly, and we can do things like go to conferences, meet each other in person, which is something I truly miss. So I'm glad that we were able to connect online. But hopefully, we can find other ways to collaborate in person, the Lord's willing. Okay, so thank you to whoever who liked or shared the stream as well. Dude, let me unmute that. Here we go. So you see the players. The topic is, again, is your social work anti-racist? Sorry for covering you, Michelle.
All
But
good.
there we go. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Well, let's just take that off. Just there we go. People get the idea. Okay. So quick shout outs. Laz is here on the Twitch, which is a good time to promote twitch.tv/SPSM Chat. Go check that out. If you are if you have a Twitch account, even if you don't stream, now would be a good time to go switch over to Twitch and boost our numbers there. Let's get this off the screen. Time is a trick, of course. Again, and thank you, Isabel, for watching us on Facebook. So, and the reason that the colors are red this time is just because I was doing a live stream for the Mighty on Friday, and just I knew I forgot to change something between now and Sunday. So there we go. Hopefully that's not the only thing I didn't remember to change. So okay, let's get into the swing of things. And if you're on the Twitter chat, introduce yourselves. I see people coming in there as well. We'll give you some shout outs there as the tweets start pouring in. So we're talking about anti-racism in social work, but of course, where this is going to be more of a conversation in general about anti-racism. And this was a topic that I wanted to first. I'd reached out to the Roving Social Worker, and then you had brought along your partners as well. So I want to get your view on the topic, and then we'll go to Matthew, and then Michelle, and then we'll circle back. So let's go to Roving Social Worker and what exactly is anti-racism? Why is it important? And why is it not being done enough in the year 2021?
Is that in 30 words or less? That is, I mean, that's a stacked question, first off. What is anti-racism? Well, it's a lot of things. What I think is really important for people to remember, especially a year into everyone kind of catching on to this word, and some of the other words like decolonization, anti-Blackness, which these aren't new terms, by the way. People are just seeing them more. It's not something you're going to fix overnight. It's not a singular policy. It's not a single thing that you can do. It's a whole system of things, because the issue is the system. I mean, all of our systems are based on white supremacy, racism, patriarchy, colonialism, different religions, and we have this all mixing together, and it's caused a lot of problems for a lot of people, and it's honestly toxic to everyone. It's not just one demographic issue. It's not just one thing we're seeing. what's really noticeable news right now, and is of particular stress to myself, is the murder of Black men and children, and Black women as well. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen several children and men get murdered by police. This is problematic because I live in a rural area with a Black husband who has been stopped frequently by police. And so that's my own personal experiences, my own relationship to social work and how I became a social worker and working in the social service field is really seeing blatant racism and segregation and deportation. I used to live in the Southwest, and now I'm working with Indigenous folks, on tribal land. And so colonization and anti-racism is a big part of my work. And how do you do that? Well, I start one with myself, and then I start with my colleagues, and then I start with our policies, and I start with our agency as a whole. And it's kind of this ripple effect, but it's on all levels of social work. So it's really hard for me to give you a really clean cut, what is this thing and how do we do it? It's so many layers of things. I invited Matt because I know he works on all layers of it. He has his own perspectives. I invited everyone here because a lot of them they've done direct service, they've done meso, and they've done macro level. And so that's kind of what we need to talk about, is what are we doing across the board, not just in one place or with one group or one thing. Okay, I've rambled enough.
That's totally fine. I actually wanted to hear from Matthew on a topic that you discussed and I mentioned earlier, kind of half jokingly, but it's also serious, of course, because that's how we do on SPSM Chat. Talking about like admitting your racism, even if like obviously like I don't know you very well, but I'm pretty sure that you're not actively committing hate crimes, but everyone has some kind of implicit bias, and we need to acknowledge that, especially people in the social work who are working with people in marginalized communities who may automatically just see your skin color and think, nope, not for me, not going to work with them because they're racist. What say you, Matthew?
Right. So anti-racism, I agree with you. I think that we have to look at it at the micro, meso, macro levels, right? But the first level is the most micro level, right? And it's internal to ourselves. And it's saying, I'm racist. And yes, I have my own personal oppressions and my family has our own history, but I'm racist. And it's okay to say that because I'm anti-racist. Or rather, I recognize my racism because I'm an anti-racist, right? And it's very difficult because when we look at having these conversations with our white or white appearing colleagues, it gets very defensive, very, very, very defensive, right? Oh, I don't have a racist bone in my body. I've yet to find where a racist bone is, right? The live, laugh, love, pray, eat, pray, love, whatever version of social work, right? Where I don't see race. And we know that that's not true, right? We know that there are implicit biases. And so starting that anti-racism work is by saying, wait a minute, I had a thought, an intrusive thought come into my head, right? That came from somewhere. Where did that come from? Well, it could be the structure, it could be people I was raised around or how I was raised, right? So I have to analyze that thought. And I have to see if that thought matches my values, my feelings, and my beliefs. And if it doesn't, right, well, I really need to question it. And even if it does, I need to question, say, where did that thought come from? Is that thought racist? And is it causing me to maybe be more concerned with a patient than I should be? Is it causing me to treat one patient differently than another? It's asking ourselves those really hard questions that we should be holding ourselves and each other accountable to, because the field of social work has a large history of racism. Even our history of social work has largely left out the contributions of Black women and Black men. We have, we look at the orphan trains, right? We look at our integration with the criminal justice system. And the school to prison pipeline. There's a lot of stuff that our field has to work on, to say nothing of CPS, which could probably be its own, special edition podcast. So I think that the concept of anti-racism is by saying it's okay to acknowledge the thoughts that I have aren't my feelings or my beliefs, but I have to really check my behavior to make sure that I understand when I'm being privileged, when I might harm someone, and what am I going to do to actively work against harming others? What am I going to do to change myself, the environment, the agencies that I work with, and the overall system?
Now, acronym alert. I believe you said CPS. For those unaware.
Child Protective Services. Sorry about that. All right. So Child Protective Services. Thank you for reminding me of that. Right. So when we look at, which referrals are made, right? Who makes a referral? Or if we get requests in from caseworkers who are overzealous towards one group of people and don't have that same zeal for another group of people, that tells me, hey, there's some racism going on here and we need to address it.
Yes, and we'll circle back to you, Matthew, but I want to get to Michelle. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything that Matt and Jay are saying. I think what comes to mind for me, I mean, it's when folks were talking about just doing the work internally, but then also looking at the systems and structures in place, I think being anti-racist means checking yourself and also checking others as well. There's like this whole call in, call out culture and what that means and what that looks like. I think as a supervisor, I mean, my main role is really supporting interns. And I talk about just kind of, there's this one image that has like becoming anti-racist and just kind of the different zones, like the fear zone, and just how do you move from the fear zone to just kind of outside of your comfort zone. And I kind of think of, how are we elevating other people's voices? How are we also, when you make a mistake, like when I supervise interns, I make it clear. I'm like, if I say something that's racist, because again, we all are racist, as I said, call me out on it, whether it's in our group. I'm always open to learning, but I also want to recognize too that it's not other people's job to teach me about their culture. I have to do that work with myself. I think about just specifically in the field of social work, there's not a lot of Filipinos, and I'm Filipino, and just kind of think about the colonial history or colonialism in the Filipino culture and what that means. I can honestly say I started learning really about anti-racism over the probably past like 5 years. And it's constantly learning and unlearning about these different systems and how I either are contributing to it, but also how can I stop it? I think when Jay was talking about the murders of, our Black community members, there was a Black man that was murdered 3 blocks away from where I live right now. And I think not just as a social worker, but as a citizen, I'm writing to City Hall. I'm, making sure I'm posting information that the family is sharing on social media and things like that. I think people think it's not happening to them or it's not happening in their community, but I also want people to recognize like this is not an outside thing, and this is not just blanket statements. We got to think about, what are we doing as a citizen, not just as a social worker, but just anybody. I think the work is important.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you a question to all of you, and that's if you have ever been accused of racism, either by a client or a colleague, and how did you manage that?
Absolutely. And the way that I managed it was by saying, I'm sorry, getting a supervisor, seeking supervision, reviewing what my intent versus my impact was, and working to make sure that particular mistake doesn't happen again. I'm going to make hundreds of thousands of mistakes as I move through my career, right? I just try to not make the same one twice. And so, yeah, it was apologizing, finding out what we can do in that moment to make that moment better, ensuring that patient got the care that they needed and transferred to a different clinician so they could start over. And I learned from it. What I didn't do is say, I'm not racist. I didn't say I don't have a racist bone in my body. I didn't blame the patient for being non-compliant. I recognized in that moment I was wrong. And then I figured out why.
Anyone else?
I think with me, like something that I realized I did that was subtle, but it wasn't until someone like called me out on it was, so in my role of supervising interns, we place interns at different school sites and thinking of, I think I was thinking of a social worker and just honestly making judgments based on the race of like, oh, can they handle, a specific social work or a specific intern because of the race or because of the school site they're in. And that wasn't necessarily them saying something to me, but it was my boss actually questioning me of being like, okay, so you don't want to assign that intern to a Black social worker. Is there a specific reason why? And I had to do my own internal work of being like, what is it that I was thinking about her? I was making assumptions based on what I knew about her, why she may have not been a good fit or a good supervisor. And I think part of that was like, it gave us kind of accountability to kind of like look with each other and be like, how are we, in the power that we have to work with interns, what are we doing to basically support them or also not elevate other people up? So it wasn't like a direct, someone told me I was being racist, but it was like, hint, what are you doing? And kind of think about what your intent is. So that was something that came up for me.
Yeah, and in my own case, doing this show, of course, I'm not a social worker, but we've had episodes where we've had Black guests, but I felt like we weren't giving that guest enough time to speak from their own experience. Like, I get like we have panels and we have co-hosts and everything, but there are times where it is necessitated that that guest, who's a person of color, have the most time to speak about these issues that they obviously have lived experience with, and like me or none of my co-hosts do, or even having all like non-black panels, like, and then we speak on black issues. Like I feel icky about that sometimes. It's not out of design. Like I don't like make an effort to like do like a show about a black topic and not have black guests, but it happens sometimes where I have like an all white panel, and it's about a social issue that affects mostly marginalized people. And at the time, it didn't like cross my mind like, hey, this might come off as like just kind of icky to some people, just because there's not a person of color speaking from their own lived experience on these issues. So that's something that like I've been trying to proactively um, challenge myself on, like going forward and doing shows, of always trying to find someone to speak from a point of view of a person of color, especially when it involves issues that are primarily people who are from marginalized communities that are affected by. Hopefully that made sense. Let's
Yeah.
yes, sorry, Matthew, go on.
I was just gonna say, it makes sense, and I think it's that fine balance that we all struggle to find of doing the work ourselves and then asking someone for a token representation, right? And how do we make sure that authentic voices are heard through without putting any extra emotional labor or burden on folks? So it's important.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've tried in the past, and that we're actually going to do in a couple of weeks, is we've had a takeover by an all black panel, which we'll have in a couple of weeks, hosted by Amade from Depressed While Black, and it is their show. Like I'm in the background to give support, but I'm off camera, and I just because I trust them to to make an awesome show, and like I can like do like fancy graphics and the stuff that like
we're actually going to do
that I'm good at. But that for me, that is a good balance of being able to provide a platform, but not trying to like also make it about myself. It's like, no, here's the show. You have creative freedom and do what you want, because I know you're going to kick ass at it. And like me being on the show for even a minute just to like say hi is a minute too long.
I will add one thing. I think because of the power differential that's kind of inherent in our work, I have never outright been told by a client of any age that I'm racist, but I'm good enough at my job that I can tell when someone is feeling uncomfortable. And I've been doing all that work that Matt was talking about earlier for, I'd say, like Michelle, 5 years, where it really became apparent to me, and where I was looking into articles and reading and education about like anti-racist and decolonization, because at that time I was working with an Indigenous population. And I started picking up on what I was doing, what my biases were, what was I saying. An important thing for social workers, and a very important thing for me, is that I always seek out consultation if I'm not under supervision. And I have some incredible mentors in my life from different backgrounds who can gently tell me, hey, was that a good idea? Was that the best way to approach it? Why do you feel that way? And I think that support from kind of across the community and reaching out to people with different experiences is really important to make sure that not only are we being held accountable and doing the work ourselves, but that we're safe or that we're working on becoming better clinicians in our communities that we work with.
Yes, definitely. And before we go on, I definitely want to get on to some tweets and comments real quickly so we can make sure people feel part of the discussion. Melissa Tebbs Batavo on Twitter says, and it is difficult and uncomfortable to do that. Okay. Oh, yes, agree with Social Work Desk about checking ourselves and acknowledging our own implicit thoughts and biases as the first step, and then goes on to say, and it is difficult, and then it refreshed. So that's it is difficult and uncomfortable to do that, but it's critical as a social worker. Absolutely. Stephen Cummings, hello, says CPS could be its own episode. I love it when people quote. I don't know if that's your Twitter handle, but like I do love it when people quote people in the Twitter chat. It makes it more accessible for people who aren't able to watch live. And thank you, Roving Social Worker, who we have right to my side, says anti-racism is the micro, meso, and macro levels. It starts with our internal.
God.
There we go. Multitasking. Cool. And then yes, and Melissa goes on to say, yes, MFK therapy. That's Michelle to my diagonal. So true how much field education plays a big role in shaping things, ups the ante for field instructors. Believe that's it on the Twitter. Keep them coming. Make sure to use the hashtag SPSM. A lot of times people will like reply to the live stream and don't use the hashtag, and I don't see them until much later. So okay, and let's get back to, we have some more comments on the Facebook. Stephen's Roman Catholic Church says, great points, Matthew. That is high praise.
I'll take what I can get where I can get it.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate you. I saw Danielle follow us on Facebook earlier, so thank you for that. Facebook.com/SPSM Chat. Hello, Lustar on Twitch. We missed you. It's been too long. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hopefully, you're still watching, and feel free to add to the conversation. And there you go. That is great timing. The Instagram account Social Workers Can Kiss My Ass is worth checking out. It's by a social worker who's very aware of the issues with the profession. And what better timing than to get on to our next topic? I was actually going to mention this later, but let's just reshuffle the deck and talk about like how does racism exist within the social work field? Like what is happening and what can be done about it to get rid of it? Let's go on to Roving Social Worker.
At what level? I mean, I have seen a lot of conversation about social work education because that's where this starts for a lot of us. We're educated, we're put in field placements for training, and then after we're post-grad, we have to usually do clinical hours, at least at the master's level. Some states you have to do clinical hours even to have a licensed bachelor's level. So there's all that part, and then I'm in education as a student, but I'm not teaching. So I'll let Michelle and Matthew kind of talk more about that part. My focus is on almost the back end of what are we doing in clinical settings, and how do we address that bias and that racism, anti-Black and other forms of racism, depending on where you are. And for me as a traveler, I'm bouncing from place to place to place to place. So cultural awareness is a big part of what I need to be good at, or at least be good at researching before I go to a new contract. In this case, I mean, it's easier for me to point out the contract I'm in right now than say when I was in rural Minnesota, because rural Minnesota was a farming town of white people who some still spoke German, because the town was very German. Now I'm on a reservation that has 2 different tribes, 6 bands between the 2 tribes. And so it's learning about all these different cultures and then all the history surrounding it. So I work with someone who's a descendant of, I think it was his great-great-grandfather was at the Battle of Little Bighorn. So I've heard a lot of stories from his family and what that played out versus what we've seen kind of whitewashed and, it was Custer's Last Stand and all that. No, it wasn't. But there's the historical context, there's the traditions, there's the different layers of how many other cultures happened to be here because of different federal laws that allowed white people to settle on this land. There are some Black people, and there's anti-Blackness amongst both white and Indigenous groups. It's not specific to just one. And so it's kind of like this mix of, I'm working with all these different people on tribal land with a sovereign government. There's all these different rules. How do I be the best clinical social worker I can be, but still provide evidence-based services, still be able to bill for that, still value culture, still bring in their ways of knowing. And one, how do I know all that? How do I learn that? And it's a really slow process. It's very difficult. I've been here almost 2 years, and I'm just starting to see some of the community maybe accept my being here a little bit more, not necessarily accepting me, but accept my being here because I've shown them. I have a kind of this chronic curiosity, so I always want to learn. And that's part of what makes me successful. But then I'm also constantly reviewing my internal bias, but I'm also looking up new literature. I'm reading books by Indigenous authors. I'm reading books about anti-racism. I'm staying active. I'm watching laws that are going on in the state here that could potentially harm our children in our communities. So I've also done some policy stuff internally, and I've helped create some of the departments so that it meets the needs of the community, not necessarily the white clinicians running the department.
All right, let's get on to Matthew. A lot to chew on there, roving social worker. We'll definitely circle back, but let's get to Matthew, and then we'll address Isabel's comment on Facebook after Michelle gets her turn. So let's get on to Matthew.
Right. So let's look systemically. I really like the racism iceberg, right? We have that tip of the iceberg, right? That's been on social media. People say mean things, right? Microaggressions, outward signs of racism, and then we have the stuff that's underneath the water, right? We have unpaid internships. We have lack of access to promotions. We have who comprises the executive suite, right? Whose voices and communities and cultures are being, given a speaking space. We have different biases. We have, reporting rates to CPS, Child Protective Services, and other agencies that are, who's getting reported higher. And these are all part of implicit bias. It's part of sometimes some very overt bias. We look at supervisors. We look at our field and demographics in general. We look at even this concept of professionalism, right? What is professional wear, right? Well, professionalism is very, white Eurocentric. We look at, microaggressions of what folks are, expected to put up with in the workplace. And then we look at retaliation when people do fight back. So there's a whole list of stuff that we have to work on in the field, right? And it is a real problem. We can also look at some of our colleagues' inability to introspect, right? I'm not shy. If I think you're racist, I'm going to say you're racist. And the inability for someone to say, wow, maybe I did something racist, let me do better, right? I think is a key component, a key requirement of our field. And I think it's something that's lacking starting at our educational standards, right? There's a lot of, classrooms the teachers have freedom of the classroom, but we have so many mandates by the CFSW, and yet anti-racism isn't yet one of them. And I think that we have to imbibe that in our practice, because otherwise we're going to keep on making the same mistakes that we've made since the inception of the professionalism of our field.
What say you, Michelle?
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that come to my mind. I think the biggest piece is when we're thinking of our child welfare system. There's been now a lot of talks about abolishing it. And what does that mean? I'm not an expert in that field, so I can't speak on it, but it's really something that I've been looking at and thinking about, especially with the murder of Ma'Khia Bryant, and just, she was in the foster care system, and there's social workers involved in her case, and is there anything we could have done in terms of foster placement? Again, not knowing the details of her case, I can't speak on that, but I think, looking at revamping kind of what social work is and kind of what our role is. I think both Matt and Jay both talked about the education system, and I highly agree that, as we're bringing in social workers into the field, who are the professors, who's the adjunct, who's getting paid to speak, what are the readings and videos and podcasts that they're listening to. There's a whole bunch of amazing social workers on Twitter. I know Justin Hardy has this, he's a PhD student that put together like this list of Black contributions to social work. And there's just different organizations as well. I wish I could like list them all. But I think part of the work is really centering the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and just kind of the work first. And I think it's the constant learning and unlearning that we have to do. How are we holding ourselves up to a higher standard? How are we, to me, it's about listening to our clients and listening to our students. And that's kind of the role I kind of play in terms of talking with students. It's like, whatever they want to hear, whatever they want to learn, I try to bring it in. And I bring in other experts, and I make sure they're getting compensated when I'm bringing them in, because I want to value the work that they're doing. Yeah, there's a lot that could be done. Not enough time though, but we got to do it all as a community.
Yes, definitely. And conversations like this are helpful. And so, but are only the beginning. And I'm glad that we have all of you. We're talking about, is your social work anti-racist? I'm Rudy Caceres, got the Roving Social Worker, got Matthew L. Schwartz, and got at MFK Therapy, Michelle Fortunado-Kewin. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
You said Kewin right. Most people say it wrong.
Awesome. I said your Twitter handle at first because I was afraid, and sometimes you just can't be afraid. You just got to go for it.
And we correct people. That's the thing. If you say somebody's name wrong, it's all good to correct them. That's what we've just learned to practice that.
Yes. Let's get on to some comments from the our highly educated chatters across our various platforms. On Facebook, Isabel, who is a prior panelist, says, do I have to put my glasses for this one? Can y'all speak about the direct connection between social work and the criminal justice system and its consequences, involuntary hospitalizations, etc.? Any takers?
I will, but I want to give space for my two colleagues first. But yeah, I got a lot to say.
Matt, go on ahead. I saw you nodding your head. Go.
You got way too excited. I'm gonna let you jump on this.
All right, then I appreciate yielding of the floor. So we have a problem in social work. Well, we have quite a few. And don't get me wrong, I love being a social worker. I love the work I do. I wouldn't be working on a doctoral program in it if I didn't believe in it. And I love it enough to be honest with our field. And part of that is looking at the role that we play in, coerced therapy, right? Putting someone into the hospital on papers versus a Soteria house. It's looking at what we're working on funding and what we're not funding. It's looking at our role within the criminal justice system and the courts in accepting contracts and in accepting referrals versus truly being with our clients, right? And having this multiple beyond duality of roles, right? To the agency and the client and then the courts. And I think it becomes really important for us to think about where we want social work to move in the future, right? Do we want to move it into authoritarianism and coerciveness, or do we want to move it into anti-fascism and working with the people, right? And taking that step down approach of let me help, you tell me how I can be helpful versus I'm going to tell you how you ought to behave, right? And we have to move out of this colonialist colonizer mindset that has just dominated the field. We have this role in the criminal justice system that some people really love, and sometimes it's just foisted upon us. And until we can tease ourselves out of that, we are part of the prison industrial complex pipeline. And that's something that in 2021 really should it should never have been a thing, but it certainly can't continue to be. So I think that we're going to see a split in the field, and I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I do welcome it because I think something has to change.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Isabel. And I see similar comments by Lustar and Laz on Twitch. And you don't need me to tell you that there's a lot of distrust of social workers. Thank you, whoever made my lights change. And so, because of their ability to be able to call 911 and have someone taken away and put in involuntary hospitalization or even arrested. And so, especially of marginalized folks, especially of people who are suicidal, who we see this oftentimes with therapists and psychiatrists. They don't want to talk about their suicidal thoughts, even if they're not even suicidal. They're just having thoughts. They don't want to talk about it with anyone with letters at the end of their name because they're afraid of being taken away. And so, how do you deal with that? I have friends who are entering the social work field right now specifically because they want to battle against that. It is real. It does happen, but there are, of course, awesome people like you who are fighting against that system, fighting against that status quo. What say you? Anyone?
I mean, so I have lived experience. I think I've learned the most from people here on Twitter and Facebook and other social media platforms who also have lived experience. I've never been put in an institution of any sorts. I've never been hospitalized. I've never been in jail as someone being held in jail. I've been to jails, but not arrested. So I've been kind of on the outside looking in, but I've learned so much from other people about those experiences. And then unfortunately, early in my career, I was heavily a part of that system or worked for crisis teams. And so I got a glimpse at what it looks like in the jail for people with mental health because we got called out there, or we were literally called out into fields or into the street by police, by other first responders. And so I've seen firsthand how some police handle it, how some police are trained that handle it. I've worked in areas where you get arrested if you have suicidal thoughts because the only place to put you is juvie or the jail. And that's more traumatizing. It's all more traumatizing. So for people coming into the field, it's like we really have to do community work. Whatever community that you decide to place yourself in, whether it's your own or someone else's, you need to figure out who's out there, because it is not okay, and it is never okay to put a child in juvie because they're suicidal. It is not okay to throw every siren up instead of just talking to them, because the reality is I have, across my career, because I don't want to break any confidentiality, but across my career, I have had lots and lots of people who were suicidal, and they simply wanted to talk. There was no need to create all these elaborate safety plans and make them sign contracts that honestly don't mean much. It was just listening. And then sometimes it was they just need to go to sleep. It's they need food. They need money. I mean, it's not even that they have some type of DSM label on them. It's just those very simple, basic things, just being a human being. So if you're coming into this field, be ready to, one, be curious, and two, be human. Because it's not okay for us to continue this, to destroy communities.
Thoughts, Michelle?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Jay was saying, because I'm also a person with lived experience. I have been called on a 5150, not put on an official hold, had to deal with police, which was not pretty. And I mean, they were luckily nice to me, but it was just, I mean, being in a facility, and the moment they found out I was a social worker, honestly, they didn't treat me. They were like, okay, you're a social worker. So they automatically assumed I was good. Like, they let me out. I was just like, all right, well, okay. I like gave my therapist's contact information. I was doing all that. And it just made me, it just makes me question the system. You know, I know systems are overloaded. But I think there was a hesitation for me as someone with lived experience to say that I was a social worker, because then there's so many social workers I've dealt with that when they found out that I was working on my social work degree, they didn't take me seriously, or they were like, you got coping skills, you know what to do. I'm like, all right, like that to me was not cool. I think something that I saw on Twitter, I think it was like a week or two ago, someone was talking about the therapists still have call 911 as one of your options if your clients can't get a hold of you. And I realized I did, and I had to take that out. So now in my voicemail, granted, I don't see clients, I see mainly interns, but because I support with crises at the schools, someone might call my number, and now I don't have call 911. I'm like, I I have, just the different crisis numbers. Luckily in San Francisco, we have this one center where they do like a differential response and they provide support to youth where they don't have to be in a hospital. It's a residential home. They get respite for 2 weeks, which is awesome. And luckily, I know the director that I'm able to work with her every time there's a student that I'm worried about. But involuntary hospitalization doesn't work. I've seen kids coming in and out. And what are we? I think also there's like a bigger picture of like what are we doing in terms of prevention, because a person got to this point because they've sought out support. And I kind of think of it as kind of like juvenile justice. It's like, unless you get in trouble or unless you get like hospitalized or put in juvie, you don't get services. How can we move like away from that and look and also work with the community? Because I see a lot of families who are like, I just don't know what to do. And we need to find ways that we're using the community care approach versus just the like, okay, here, we're just going to hospitalize you, or we're going to put you in juvie, or mandate you to like 8 sessions of therapy, which I'm like, if you're as a teen, 8 sessions of therapy, if you're mandating me, I'm not going to talk. There's like the teen in me that comes out that I'm like, all right, yeah.
No, great points. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because it's not enough to just like have on your Twitter bio that you're anti-racist or whatever, or like it's words are not enough. Hashtags are not enough. We know this. And so to be anti-racist is to be proactive and to be visible and to actively making change in your field as much as you can, and making a big stink about things, even when it makes you unpopular, even when like your other right friends or colleagues think that you're out of line or whatever, or try to change your mind. So it definitely can be very thankless work, but I'm glad that all of you are out there fighting the good fight and not accepting the status quo. So let's get on to some more comments and chatters, and then we'll go into final thoughts. And feel free to, as I'm reading the comments, and start formulating your final words of wisdom and anything that you meant to get out during this past hour, just didn't have time to. We can address that. So let's get into some chatters. Laz on Twitch is having fun making my lights change, but also has this to say. I have to get closer to the screen. I talk to a lot of people who feel like fucking failures because they have gone through this awful forced or coerced treatment, and then they're having thoughts of suicide or death again and feel like that means they aren't trying or are a failure. Telling them that I have those thoughts actually makes a difference. Like, wow, really? Never were told by anyone else. Yes, great point. Laz does peer support and does a kick-ass job at it. Lustar says social work podcast, aka Jonathan Singer, is worth a follow on Twitter. He was a guest too. You mean former SPSM co-host Jonathan Singer? Like, yeah, we go way back. He was SPSM like through and through before like I even knew what SPSM was about. Yeah, he's a cool guy. But go check out episode 40 in particular, which you can go on any of the various podcast platforms and give a listen to. Lustar also says only call 911 if you're okay with the person being killed by the police. Lustar's I heard a verbal from Roving Social Worker. What say you?
Interestingly enough, my department finally came to that conclusion this last week. Something I've been saying for 2 years. Don't call 911 on someone unless you're willing to watch them be arrested or killed. And my supervisor's the one that said it, which was kind of stunning. But yes, I thank you for that comment, because we do need to hear it and we do need to recognize it. Police are not safe.
Yes. And let me see before Here we go. Lustar also says so much, and thank you for the comments. We missed you, Lustar. We missed your awesome comments. So much of social work has been co-opted by the system. I'm a baby social worker too, partway through my bachelor's degree, albeit on extended hiatus. Can we give some words of wisdom, encouragement to Lustar as they continue their journey towards being a social worker?
Stay curious.
Connect with
Always
other
ask
folks.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay to fuck up. You're going to fuck up every time. Like every day. I remember listening to a podcast with Bruce Perry, and one of the best things he said is, I make clinical mistakes every day. We all do. And just accepting that. The racist stuff that we've been talking about, we do these things every day, whether it's the somewhere in that bottom part of the iceberg that Matt was talking about. I put up like a meme thing. It's that real subtle stuff. But it's stay curious, learn from it, and keep going. And know that you're going to make mistakes, but try not to make them again.
And I would say normalizing those suicidal thoughts, right? Whenever I have a new patient, we talk about the bounds of confidentiality. I like to normalize that, if I were to pull half my entire building, more than half clinicians, coworkers, support staff, patients would have said in the past hour they had a suicidal thought, right? The call of death is a natural thought process. It's when it's, we look at whether it's ego syntonic, does the thought of death make us feel comfortable? Is it ego dystonic, does it make us feel uncomfortable? And what can we do about that? And when we decriminalize our thoughts, and when we work to remember that I'm an anarchist, when we keep us safe, right? When we work together as a community, we can have a lot more progress than whenever we try to coerce or force someone. And I would say another word of advice, and certainly also sort of a final thought, is that there's a lot of disability intersectionality. We look at racism and disability within social work and within the system, right? We closed down the hospitals because they were awful, and the institutions were places of torture, and then we didn't fund anything in the community. And the reason why so often people have the police called on them is out of racism and fear. And generally that fear is not only is not really from racism, it's this fear, it's the racism there, but the fear is that they themselves might become disabled one day. And so they try to remove people with disabilities from the public view. And that's a much longer conversation that we have to have in social work, but it also certainly comes into play when we look at prisons being used as mental health institutions.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things I would just add is find who your mentors, your supervisors, your go-to people. I was kind of forced onto Twitter for school, my DSW program, but I'm loving it. But I found it's amazing how much I'm learning. My bookmarks probably on Twitter are just way too much. But I feel like a lot of people that I'm learning from, continuing to grow, we talk about this too, and I know it sounds cheesy, but like the self-care thing, but I think it's important because this work is hard, and it's just remembering it's not like, it's, it's a marathon, it's not a race. So making sure you have people who have your back, but also knowing to take care of yourself, and taking those social media breaks or whatever it is that you need to do. Or knowing if something is hard for you. Like, I know there's days where I used to have to do a couple suicide assessments, and I would have to tag someone in, and I would have to trust myself and that it's okay to let somebody else support the work. Nobody's a savior here. I think that's what I've told my interns. I'm like, if you're here to try to save, people, you're in the wrong field. Nobody needs to be saved.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And before we get into final thoughts, let's check in on the Twitter. Stephen Cummings says, I used to work in an inpatient psychiatric unit early in my social work practice. Looking back, I realized so much of that process was the system checking boxes, not treatment. Matthew Schwartz says, follow at Imani _Barbaran. Her work is out of this world. And Melissa again says, amazing how often we have to wait for kids to get worse before we get them better with our current mental health system. Zachary Mallory, who was our guest last week and is also helping moderating the chat. We appreciate that. Says, I cannot agree with everything you're saying anymore. Thank you for talking about this. I'm going to follow all of you and learn from you. I'm working on my bachelor's in psychology, but I will go back for my MSW. Best wishes. Roving Social Worker, involuntary hospitalization doesn't work, as said by MFK Therapy. We also appreciate it when our guests share links to resources. We'll put those in the blog as well, SPSMchat.com. Syllabus that at Justin S. Hardy put together, Black Contributions to Social Welfare and Social Work History. And also another graphic. I don't think we can really do this justice on here. Oh, messed it up. Okay. All right. Let's let's go on to last minute comments from Lustar, who says, my social work hero is an Australian abolitionist called Deb Kilroy. First woman with a serious criminal conviction to be granted not only her social work degree, but also be admitted to her practice at law here. She runs an org called Sisters Inside. I see Michelle nodding their head. Familiar?
No, just loving Lustar. Lustar, we gotta give you love. Like you gotta get Lustar on here.
Oh yeah, it's going to happen. We just have to like they're in Australia, so like I'm shocked.
That's a time zone
like,
thing.
It's all. I mean, if they're up right now, then we'll make it work. Okay, but yes, can't say enough good things about Lustar. Let's get on to final thoughts now. We appreciate that, and let's go on to Roving Social Worker.
Thank you for having me on. Part of my final thought. There's just so much to talk about and not enough time. I appreciate that we're having this conversation. I appreciate that both Matt and Michelle agreed to do this last minute. Thank you, Matt, for specifically saying you're doing it for me. I love you. And I was not laughing at what Matt was saying earlier. I was laughing at some of the Lustar comments. They were hilarious. Thank you for those two. Stay curious. Keep working on yourself. And for social workers out there, know that you're not alone. I know there's a lot of social workers who aren't working on this right now. So please reach out to us. All of us are active on Twitter. We have websites. Feel free to, drop a DM in whatever social media you find us in. And we're here to support you too.
Yes. And you are at travel_MSW on Twitter. What exactly is a travel MSW?
I am a contractor. I'm like a travel nurse, but a social work version, a locum tenens. So I go from place to place to place. But right now I'm kind of stuck in one place, though I like it. So I shouldn't say I'm stuck. I really enjoy where I am. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the show this week. Hopefully it's not the last. I'm so glad we were able to make this work. So until next time. Final thoughts, Matthew?
So, all right. Well, thank you for having me on, Jay. I love you. And I mean, you're always welcome to laugh at me. I don't take myself seriously. No one else should. So, one of the things that I guess is my final thought is that we can either admit that the problem's here, because we know it is, and we can do something about it, right? First step in addressing a problem is admitting we have one. Or we can just sort of close our eyes, go la, 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 la. I don't see race, and then nothing improves. And that's not really an option. It's not an ethical option. It's not a real option. It might be an option that makes people feel better about some of their family members or what they grew up learning. But we have to undo these systems, and we have to undo what we've learned that just doesn't work. So I don't know, buckle up and get ready to do the work, because there's a whole host of new social workers coming in who aren't going to let the status quo stay.
Thank you, Matthew. Much appreciated. I'm glad that you took a risk on us. Hopefully we didn't scare you away. We can have you back on in the future, because you definitely can talk about a whole multitude of different issues.
Thank you.
Awesome. And real quickly, it went by, but you are at Social Work Desk on Twitter. How did you come up with a name like that?
So I was looking originally when I was in a field placement, they were like, no, don't be on social media. And I was like, all right, well, what can be my hidden username? And then I sort of was like, getting your first social work desk is actually a really important thing for a lot of us, but I think that we don't necessarily always, cherish or talk about. But I think every social worker that's ever got on their first desk, whether it was mine was in a closet, or in a disused, location underneath the stairs with a sign saying "Beware of Leopard," right? Wherever it is, right? It's a pretty special moment, and we do a lot. Our cars and our desks are where we do a lot of healing with folks. And so I didn't figure social work car was going to cut it, but social work desk made it happen.
And I will say that you're probably the guest with the most letters at the end of their name, and I am curious, what is CASAC-T mean?
So that's a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor trainee. I've reached the hours to sit for the exam, but first I need to sit for my clinical exam because that's what I'm studying for. So I'm an integrationist. So I work with folks who struggle with mental health, with substance abuse, both. And so that's just one of my parts of alphabet soup that I've collected along the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's get on to final thoughts. Michelle?
Well, just really enjoyed being here. It's weird being on this side. I'm used to being on the background end, just typing everybody's thoughts. I think just ditto to what Jay and Matt have said. The biggest thing I just kind of really want to share is just again, know your passion, know your why. Remember your why. There's going to be hard times, but also know you got a lot of support. Also, I have to shout out, it is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And maybe, as we know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a lot of great work people are doing. And I'm going to add more stuff to the feed. There's some Pacific Islanders that I want to just shout out that are doing social work on different levels. So, yeah, keep up the work.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm glad to finally have you on the other end of the screen, and you are at MFK Therapy. Easy enough. The MFK, of course, is for the initials of your name. So thank you. I'm glad that we're able to make this work. And I'm glad that you're now officially a part of the team on the on-camera side. And hopefully it won't be the last time. So thank you for offering all of your valuable insight.
Of course. Thanks.
Awesome. And that is going to do it for this week. I've been your host at Rudy Caceres on Twitter and Instagram, I guess. But we are all as a whole, SPSM Chat at SPSM Chat. We stream every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, facebook.com/SPSM Chat, twitch.tv/SPSM Chat, youtube.com/SPSM Chat, where you can see all past episodes, even going back to the what the hell is his name? The social work podcast host guy's name.
Jonathan Singer.
Jonathan Singer. I swear I know him well. Twitter.com/SPSM Chat, and make sure to use the hashtag SPSM even throughout the week. Keep boosting that brand. We love it. That is going to do it for this week. Definitely go shower these people with some love. Follow them, give them money if they ever ask for it. No questions asked. And happy Mother's Day. I totally almost forgot about that. So happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mothers out there, even the semi-wonderful mothers. It's hey, we'll take it easy on you this time, just one day. Okay, before I say something completely wrong, I'm going to call it an evening, and I will let who should I call on? I will let Roving Social Worker give the sign off for this week. So take it away, sign off, SPSM Chat, Roving Social Worker, in however way you see fit.
Thank you and good night. Bye.